Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karava Vahai Tejasvi Navadhi Tamastu Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Good. Welcome back. Just in case any of you haven't come for the last couple of classes, I need to summarize our story very briefly so we can get things in context. Remember that it's like one of those serials that you get on TV. They always have to show what happened before. The stories are like that. So remember that Bhima was captured by this huge cobra. Cobra in Sanskrit is Ajagara. Ajagara literally means that which eats goats. So a cobra large enough to eat a baby goat, who's actually the great Rajarshi Nahusha. Nahusha was a great rishi and king from ancient times who got cursed by Agastya to be this cobra. He captures Bhima. Yuddhishthira comes to rescue Bhima. Yuddhishthira asks the snake, what can we do to free him? And the Nahusha was cursed in such a way that he's freed from the curse if he can have answers given by a wise man. And Yuddhishthira presents this opportunity for Nahusha to become free from his curse. And he asks some questions of Yuddhishthira. That much we've seen. What was a little surprising is after Yuddhishthira responds to the snake's question, Yuddhishthira has some questions for the snake, which was quite unexpected. And they're questions about Dharma. Let me turn this up a little bit. They're questions about Dharma. And that makes it even more surprising because who is the expert in Dharma? Yuddhishthira. And yet he continues to ask questions about Dharma. We discussed this briefly, but it's really nice to observe. This is a sign of a really wise person. A person who knows, who understands that as much as they know, there is more to be known. In fact, the wisest are those who come to understand how much they don't know. Honestly, the really wise person is one who has a full appreciation of how much they don't know yet, and that wisdom gives a real humility. And we see that humility in Yuddhishthira. So he takes this opportunity, thinking that this Ajagara, he doesn't know Ajagara is Nahusha, he has no idea. But he knows this Ajagara, this cobra, is quite intelligent. And he thinks maybe this is an opportunity to learn even more about Dharma. So therefore Yuddhishthira asked, in our last class, he asked some questions about Dharma. We won't review them, but we'll continue because he's got more questions for the Ajagara, for the cobra. So Yuddhishthira asks, Yuddhishthira vacha, Yuddhishthira katam swarge gate sarpa, katam swarge gate karmanam chapalam dhruvam, karmanam chad asharirasya drishyeta, asharirasya vishayan shabravihi me, vishayan shabravi. He asks, Katam, how? Yuddhishthira asks, Katam, how? Sarpa, O snake, how is Swarge Gatihi? What is the path to heaven? Katam Swarge Gatihi. What is the path to heaven? Also, Karmanam Chapalam Dhruvam. How is it that the phala, the results of karmanam, of karma, how is it that the results of our actions are dhruvam, guaranteed? If you do a good act, how is it that you're guaranteed a good result? If you do a harmful act, how is it that you are guaranteed an undesirable result? Asharirasya, for one who has died. One who doesn't have a body, literally, means one who has died. For one who has died, how does the law of karma guarantee that based on your good deeds in this life, you should reach heaven, and based on your harmful deeds in this life, you should go to the other place, Naraka, hell. Or, actually, we're going to see a little different response here. So yes, how is it so? Drishyeta, if you understand this, Vishayan, O snake, if you understand this subject, pravihi me, tell me, if you understand this subject, please tell me, how does one get to heaven? How does karma take one to heaven? Sarpavacha, Tisro Vaigatayo Rajan, Tisro Vaigat, Paridrishta Swakarma Bihi, Paridrishta, Manushyam Swargavasascha, Manusyam Swargavasascha, Manusyam Swargavasascha, Tiryagyonischa Tatridha, Tiryagyonischa Tatridha. Rajan, O king, Tisraha Gatayaha, vai, indeed. Indeed, there are Tisraha, three, Gatayaha, three gatis, three paths. There are three paths which are paridrishtaha, which are observed. There are three paths which are observed, sukarmibihi, which occur due to one's karma. Due to the karmas one commits in life, paridrishtaha, these three different paths are observed. Paridrishtaha, they are observed. What are observed? Tisraha gatayaha, three paths. What are those three paths? Number one, actually we'll call it number two. Number two, manushyam. Number one, swargavasaha. Swargavasaha, living in heaven. Number one. Manushyam, getting another human birth in the middle, and tiryagyonihicha, and having birth as a tirya. This is Sanskrit. Tiryag literally means sideways. What is it that lives sideways? Your backbone goes this way. Most animals and critters, their backbones go this way. So therefore, tiryak, which literally means sideways, becomes a Sanskrit word for animals. Sanskrit is lovely. But there's a pattern here. Let me just put it briefly on the board because we want to see that pattern. So one is swarga, heaven. The second is Manushya, which is the status of being a Manusha, human birth. And the third is Tiryak Yoni. Yoni means birth here. So birth as an animal. Tiryak Yoni. These three. This is a roadmap for reincarnation. Where are we now? I don't see any counter examples in our audience. You all seem to have made it this far. But now the question becomes, where do we go from here? And clearly there are two possibilities. Three possibilities. All right. So these are the three possibilities. He says, Tisraha Gatayaha. There are three possibilities. And what are those three possibilities? Swargavasaha, living in heaven. Manushyam, getting born as a human being. Tiryagyonihi, birth as an animal. Tat trividha. It is threefold. Then he explains. Tatra vai manusha lokad, tatra vai manusha danadibhiratandritaha, danadibhir ahimsarta samhayuktaihi, ahimsarta samha karanai swargamashnute, karanai swargamashnute. Tatra, there, with regard to our subject matter, vai, indeed, manushat lokat. Suppose when you die, manushat lokat, from this human world. From this human world, you travel on. You travel on, of course, according to your karma. That's one of the basic principles of karma. Where the doctrine of karma begins, just to remember this very important point, the doctrine of karma begins by making a distinction between drishtapala and adrishtapala. If we don't understand this, we don't understand anything about the doctrine of karma. What are we talking about? Drishtapala, the seen effect, the immediate effect of a karma. So if I drop something, it has an immediate effect. What is the effect? It falls. That is the drishtapala. But it's said that for every karma there are two results, not one. So and to illustrate that, suppose instead of just dropping this, suppose I take this and throw it at you, and it bounces off of your forehead, leaving a small cut. Possible. So for that act, there are the same two results. One act is, for me, the result of that act is two karmas. Two results. One result is I no longer have my glasses. They're gone. Second result is, since I have done some harmful act to you, I should be the recipient of some undesirable situation in the future. Notice, one action, two results. One result is immediate and seen. That is called drishta phala, seen result. The other result is unseen in the present moment. It is called adrishta, unseen phala. That is the result that is going to fructify at some later time and place. So this is the basic, all of the entire doctrine of karma, which is quite elaborate. We won't talk further about it here. But it all is based on this twofold distinction between drishtapala and adrishtapala. So based on your actions in this life, there are lots of adrishtapalas, lots of unseen results, which means they're results waiting to happen. Basically, you've committed the action, but the result is in abeyance. It's waiting to happen. When will it happen? We don't know. But if you die, then it won't happen in this life. If you die with some of these adrishtapalas remaining, if you die, they cannot fructify in this life, so they must necessarily fructify in a later life. And that's what's referred to here. Manushat lokat. If you leave this human life, having done what kinds of karmas? Danadi bihi. Having done actions like dana, like charity. And not only actions like charity, but ahimsa, ahimsarta. If you are ahimsarta samayuktaihi, if you have done actions which are based on ahimsa, not harming anyone. Suppose you could live your entire life without harming a single person or creature. That would be remarkable, right? I mean, it's pretty hard to avoid hurting people. It happens. We try our best, but it happens. So we end up doing harm to others. ahimsa. Also, sometimes we're not as charitable as we might be. There's a lack of dana. So here it says, suppose a person is engaged in actions like dana, very, very charitable. By the way, charity doesn't just mean money. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone is your time, your personal engagement. Don't think of it in a narrow sense of money. It's not. Dana means giving of yourself, and giving whatever is needed. So suppose someone has given charity, atandritaha, very freely, very deliberately, very fully and completely. They've given charity, and ahimsa artha samayuktahi, and they are endowed with the results of many acts of ahimsa. Throughout their lives, they have carefully avoided hurting, causing any harm whatsoever. Karanaihi, for these reasons, because of the karmas done by such a person, swargam ashnute, they enjoy, they will experience what? Swargam, heaven. So this simply says that by committing good deeds, by avoiding harmful deeds in this life, your karma will take you the upward directions towards swarga. We'll go through this quickly because the meaning is quite simple. And what is the other possibility? Kama krodha samhayukto, kama krodha himsa lobha samanvitaha, himsa lobha manushyatvat paribhrashtas, manushyatvat Tiryagyo now prasuyate, tiryagyo now. So on the other hand, the prior verse talked about someone who was careful not to cause any harm to anyone throughout their life, and they were very generous, all good qualities. Now we get the opposite case. Kama krodha samayuktaha, someone who is filled with kama, desire, and krodha, anger. By the way, those two tend to go together. Have you figured that out? Kama and krodha, desire and anger, they go together. Why do they go together? Wherever there's kama, there's krodha. Wherever there's desire, there's anger. Why is that so? Wherever there is desire, are there not obstacles to fulfilling your desire? Always. When you have a desire and there's an obstacle preventing you from fulfilling that desire, what do you feel? Krodha. So they come together as a pair. Kama, krodha, samayuktaha, one who is filled with kama, desire, and krodha, anger. One who is ahimsa, lobha, samanvitaha, one who is filled with himsa, harmful feelings and harmful actions, and lobha, greed. So giving the opposite of what we saw in a prior verse. Someone who is filled with desire and anger, someone who is hurtful and greedy. What about them? Manushyat paribhrashtaha. When they die, they are paribhrashtaha. They fall. They fall from where? Manushyat. They fall from this human life. And what happens then? Prasuyate, they are born. Tiryagyo, now, they're born as an animal. Now, this is oversimplified massively. The doctrine of karma is extremely complex, and these two verses give a real oversimplification, because, first of all, when you do good actions in this life, is there any rule that says those good actions will fructify in the immediately succeeding life? There's no rule. It just says, the law of karma merely says, when you die, whatever karmas are yet to fructify, they will fructify. That's guaranteed. When will they fructify? There's no way of predicting, no way of knowing. It could be in the immediately succeeding life. It need not be in the immediately succeeding life? We don't know. So I'm just saying this to point out the fact that these two verses do present an overly simplistic view of karma, because the purpose of these verses, the purpose of Ajagara's response is not to give a full explanation of the doctrine of karma, but rather to point out a very fundamental principle. And what is that fundamental principle? Our actions have consequences. Now that seems so obvious, but sometimes we forget that our actions have consequences not only in the immediate future, but our actions can have long-term consequences. We sometimes lose sight of that. We're usually focused on the immediate consequences of our actions. Immediate consequences, what? Drishtaphala. Long-term consequences, what? Adrishtaphala. Give an example. April 15th is an infamous date in this country because it's a date by which you have to file your income taxes. Let's take this as an example. Suppose it's tax time and you decide that you're going to the American English word is you're going to fudge the numbers. What does fudge mean? What a strange word. Anyway, that's the expression used here. You fudge the numbers. You cut some corners. Basically, you lie and call it what it is. You lie and cheat. Suppose. Why would you do such a thing? Well, there's an immediate consequence for lying and cheating. What is the immediate consequence of lying and cheating? You pay a lot less tax. You can save thousands of dollars by lying and cheating. You don't need me to tell you this. It's obvious. But you refrain from lying and cheating on your taxes. Why? You know there are not only short-term consequences for your actions, there are also long-term consequences for your actions. Now, long-term can come in that adrishtaphala is the long-term result. It's a long-term consequence. It means that that consequence will fructify at some later date. Some later date need not be in the next life. Some later date could be 18 months from now when you get that letter from the IRS saying there have been some irregularities noticed in your tax returns, and you are being audited, the dreadful audit. So that audit that you get 18 months later could indeed be understood as adrishtaphala. It is the later consequence of your action. That later consequence could come later in this life or could come after this life. We don't know. There's no way of knowing. But the point is that we are all very alert about the short-term consequences of our actions. We're not always careful about the long-term consequences. Most of you, I think, are pretty good about your taxes, but there may be other areas in life where we make compromises. We do. We make ethical compromises for the sake of some immediate gain, but those ethical compromises have long-term consequences. That's really what these two verses are about. And not only do the negative acts you do have long-term consequences, the positive ones do also. Suppose you help someone out. Suppose a good example. Someone's in a financial hard time. They say, "Can you help me out?" You give them $1,000. For that action of giving them $1,000, there's drishtaphala and adrishtaphala. When you give your friend $1,000 or family member, what is the drishtaphala of your act? The drishtaphala is, for you, you are $1,000 poorer. That's the drishtaphala. It is. That also you feel good about helping your friend. That's also drishtapala. So part of the drishtapala is you feel good about helping your friend or family member. The other part of the drishtapala is your $1,000 poor. But what about the adrishtapala? That's really a great help to that person. They were really struggling. They really needed your help. You came through for them. You did something really great to bail them out, to help them out. And that guarantees that you will have some delayed result, adrishtapala, some consequence, but a good consequence that will come sometime to you in the future. When? We don't know. Does it have to be in the next life? It doesn't have to be in the next life. It could be in this life. Suppose your friend or family member you helped out, suppose 5 years from now they win a big lottery. They win some $100 million lottery. Do you think they'll repay your debt? Oh, come on. Oh. Oh, come on. Let us not be so cynical. Come on. I think they would not merely give you your $1,000, but they would add a couple of zeros onto that 1,000 before they returned it to you. You'll get back $10,000 or $100,000 for that. That's definitely. Come on. All right. By the way, have we heard this kind of teaching before? Whatever happens next depends. We just studied Bhagavad Gita not too many months ago, and in chapter 14, a very similar verse comes. In chapter 14, if you want to look it up later, this is verse 18. Urdhvam gachanti sattvasthaha. Those who are established in sattva guna, in the best qualities. What happens to them? Urdhvam gachanti. They go up. They go to better births or better consequences. Madhye tishtanti rajasaha. Those who are driven by rajas, by desires and passions, they madhyastha, they stay in the middle. Which means those who are established in good qualities, they go up to swarga, or some better condition. Those who are driven by rajas, rajoguna, remember chapter 14 is all about the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. So those who are driven mostly by rajas, the guna about desire and activity, madhye tishtanti, they stay in the middle, in a human birth. On the other hand, jaghanya guna vrittasthaha, those who are established in the lowest guna. What about that? Tamasaha, in tamas, that the guna of ignorance and darkness and lethargy. What about them? Adho gachanti, they go down. So exactly the same as these two verses say. But what's really significant, and the reason I wanted to share that verse with you, is for the sake of the following verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, we get a whole chapter on this topic. Here in this chapter of the Mahabharata, by the way, the Bhagavad Gita is simply a different chapter of the Mahabharata. So I'm reading from one chapter of the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita. Another chapter of the Mahabharata is what we're studying. In this chapter, we have only 2 verses dedicated to this topic of karma. In this chapter of the Mahabharata, chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, the whole chapter is devoted. So it goes on to the very next verse. Let me tell you the very next verse. Prior verse said those who have sattva guna, good qualities and good actions, they go up. Those who have rajoguna, in the middle qualities and actions, they stay in the middle. And those who have tamo guna, and the lowly actions and behaviors, they go down. Then immediately thereafter, Sri Krishna says, Nanyam gunebhyaha kartaram yada drashta anupashyati. When you I'll paraphrase. When you figure it out that you are independent of these gunas, that it is these gunas that are actually engaged in the behaviors. Your behavior is determined by the qualities of your body and mind, the gunas of your qualities of mind. And then he says, Gunebhya param veti. This is really the key. The one who knows, veti, the one who knows what is gunebhya param, that which is beyond the gunas. The one who knows that which is beyond the gunas, madbhavam sodikachati, that person reaches my state. What is the point here? Prior verse talked about going to heaven or going to hell. The next verse says you should transcend going to heaven and going to hell. Gunebhya param veti. Your qualities and behavior can cause a rebirth in a heavenly condition or in an animal condition or in some hellish condition. But what is Sri Krishna's advice? After saying your behavior can lead you to heaven or hell, then you'd think in the next verse he should say, therefore you should focus on going to heaven. Does he say that? He doesn't say that. What does he say? He says you should figure out what is beyond the qualities of your body and mind. You should figure out what is beyond heaven and hell and rebirth. This is something that's really unique to this Hindu tradition. Please notice that the biblical traditions are all focused on, after you die, there are only two options, heaven or hell. Of course, the Hindu tradition also has, in fact, the comment is, whatever others do, Hindus do better. So if they have one heaven and one hell, what do the Hindus do? We have 7 heavens and 7 hells. Whatever they do, we do better. I'm being silly intentionally. But the real point is that the ultimate goal, according to the teachings of Vedanta, according to the teachings of Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the ultimate goal is not to go to heaven. The ultimate goal is not to avoid hell. Those are the biblical goals. For from a Hindu standpoint, the ultimate goal is not to be born, not to avoid rebirth as an animal, or worse. Cockroaches also are tiryak. The goal is not to go to heaven. The goal is not a better rebirth. The goal is not to avoid slipping down in your next birth. What is the goal? To go beyond all of that. That's unique. So the ultimate goal in this tradition we call moksha, freedom, liberation. And one of the many meanings of moksha is liberation from rebirth itself. It is a goal which transcends heaven and earth. Sri Krishna concludes, Madbhavam sodigachyate. One becomes non-separate from Ishvara. Notice going to heaven, and I'm smiling now, just a lovely memory of Puja Swami Tadatmananda. He would love to make jokes about this. He says, just permit me. Suppose you go to heaven. And in heaven, there's Bhagavan is there, God is there. So you look at God from the front, pretty impressive. Look at God from the side, impressive. From the back, impressive. From the other side, so you go on looking and looking and looking and looking and looking. He says, won't you get bored after a while? How long? He would make all these silly jokes. How long can you just sit there and look at Bhagavan? That's heaven? Because the conventional idea of heaven is being in the same place as Bhagavan, as God. But what does Sri Krishna say? Madbhavam saha adhigacchati. He says, one who transcends rebirth, one who transcends the gunas, the qualities, they achieve madbhavam, my state, my condition. One way of explaining that is a big topic. We don't want to go in great depth here, but to say you become non-separate from Ishvara, non-separate from God. You'll find language. You merge into that reality. You merge into God. How different the vision of heaven, just sitting there looking at God with a big grin on your face, versus becoming non-separate from that Ishvara. So let's be very clear. These two verses are a very limited presentation. Elsewhere in the Mahabharata, we find much more elaborate presentations talking about transcending birth and rebirth, the ultimate goal. Okay, Yuddhishthira has yet another question. We'll see that next question. His last question I'll mention. Yuddhishthira vacha, Yuddhishthira sarvajñam tvam katam moha, sarvajñam tvam katam avishat swargavasinam, avishat evam adbhuta karmanam, evam adbhuta iti me samshayo mahan. So, Yudhishthira's last question. Katam, how? Moha avishata tvam. Katam, how? How did moha, delusion, how did this moha, this delusion, tvam avishata, how did this delusion enter you? That's literal meaning. How did you become so deluded? Now this is a reference back to the story. Do you remember the story that Nahusha was being taken in a palanquin to meet Indrani, Indra's wife. And he was in a hurry. So he starts kicking the brahmanas who were carrying his palanquin, one of which was the rishi Agastya, who then cursed him. And so with reference to that story, Yuddhishthira asked, Katam moha avishata. How did you fall into such delusion? Actually, Yuddhishthira, by the way, Yuddhishthira doesn't know that story. There's no evidence that he knows the story, but Nahusha, actually, Nahusha told him the story in brief. We don't know how elaborately. We only know what's recorded here in the Mahabharata. We don't know how elaborate the story was. The story could have been very elaborate. We don't know. But definitely Yuddhishthira knows that the snake was Nahusha, who was cursed. He was cursed because he committed a sin. And so Yuddhishthira naturally asked, what caused you to behave in that way? Let's suppose Yuddhishthira knows. I think from the nature of this verse, it suggests that Yuddhishthira must probably know the whole story. So let us assume that Nahusha that the snake, Ajagara, told Yuddhishthira very elaborately. We got only a very brief account here, but let's assume that the story was told very elaborately. I think it's a reasonable assumption. So therefore, Yuddhishthira asks, what is the American English? How did you blow it so badly? A good American English. What led you to make such a terrible mistake? So, katam moham tvam avishata. How did you fall into such delusion? You who are sarvajñam, literally all-knowing, it means wise. You, as Nahusha, you were so wise, and also you were swargavasinam. You were dwelling in heaven at that time. We have to return. There's a bit of the backstory we didn't get yet. The story is quite elaborate. I told part of it at the beginning of the chapter. Allow me to tell a little bit more of the story right here. What do they call it? Backstory. The backstory is this. Indra kills this asura, Vritrasura. I'll spare you all the details. This asura happened to be a brahmana. Go figure it. Brahmana asura. That's the story. But since Indra kills this brahmana, he is now guilty of brahma hatya, the sin of killing a brahmana. And if you kill a brahmana, you're supposed to undergo a lot of expiatory karmas. You have to, in Sanskrit, prayaschitta. You have to do a lot of penance. If you commit a sin, you have to do some penance. But if you commit the highest of sins, killing a brahmana, you have to do tremendous penance. So Indra disappeared from heaven because he was doing all of this tapasya, all of this penance. Meanwhile, all the devas, all the gods are in heaven, and no one is in charge. Who's in charge of heaven? Indra. He's the king of the gods. The king is missing. It's like if the president of a country, I think this happened in Ukraine, the president of the country, he just left. He just disappeared. And then what do? You have to do something. So in Ukraine, they actually had to elect another president because their president or prime minister, remember, he bailed out, he went to Russia, remember that. Anyway. So here, Indra bails out, Indra leaves heaven, all of the devas are there, no one is in charge. And he says, who can we make Indra? Remember, in the mythology, Indra is not necessarily a particular deva. Indra is a position, a status. Whichever god is in charge of heaven, whoever is the king of heaven, whoever is the master of this heavenly domain, that one is called Indra. Indra is really more of a position than a particular deity. So when the devas noticed that Indra is out of station for a long time, they figured out, we better get a replacement. Who is a replacement? Well, they noticed this Nahusha, who had, now we're back to our main story, this Nahusha who had just completed doing 100 Ashwamedha yagas. So this Ashwamedha yaga is one of the most complicated, huge ritual, and this Nahusha had completed 100 of them. The amount of grace one receives through the performance of 100 of these rituals is enough to elevate that person tremendously. So the devas decided, let us elevate this Nahusha to the position of Indra in heaven. So Nahusha becomes a temporary Indra, basically. Temporary because eventually the real Indra will finish his penance and he'll come back. But until then, the devas need someone to be in charge, so they make this Nahusha the in charge of heaven. Then the other part of the story comes in, he gets attracted to Indra's wife, and then all the problems come. We saw that part of the before. Anyway, this is to explain that Nahusha was first very wise, according to Yuddhishthira. He says, you are sarvajñam, you are very wise. Not only is he very wise, but he is svargavasinam, he is living in heaven. Not only is he living in heaven, he's achieved the status of Indra, the highest possible condition one could achieve in heaven. So therefore Yuddhishthira asks, evam adbhuta karmanam katam moha avishata. How did you blow it so badly? Pardon my American English. How did you blow it so badly? This evam adbhuta karmanam, as a result of what kind of strange karma? What possibly could have led this to happen? You had achieved such a high status. What went wrong? Iti me samshayaha mahan. Thus is me samshayaha, my doubt, my confusion, mahan, my great doubt, my great confusion. So he asked the Sarpa, the Ajagara snake, he asked, what happened? How did you blow it so badly? And Ajagara replies, Sarpa vacha, Sarpa. Suprajnam hiti chechuram. Suprajnam hapi chech. Riddhir mohayate naram. Riddhir mohayate. Vartamana sukhe sarvo. Vartamana sukhe. Navaiti timatir mama. In the second line, Riddhi mohayate naram. Riddhi, success, prosperity, high status. Riddhi. Riddhi mohayate deludes naram, a person. A person gets deluded by riddhi, by success, by prosperity, by power. Suprajnam api, even if he's very wise. Suprajnam, even if he's very wise. Chet shuram, and he's very courageous. Even if he's very courageous. Courageous means committed to truth, among other things. If he's very courageously committed to the truth and he's very wise, even then, riddhihi, success, and let me paraphrase it as power, mohayate naram. You've heard the English expression, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Who has the most power in heaven? Indra. So here, Nahusha had assumed the status of having absolute power. And having that absolute power, he was corrupted absolutely, to the point that he would kick these saintly men who were carrying him along. He was corrupted in the sense that he would have a scheme to try to get Indra's wife. How corrupted is that? Where does the corruption come from? From power. That statement seems so simplistic, but it also seems so absolutely true. This has always been recognized, which is why to say someone who has power will be corrupted to the extent they have that power, which is why in ancient times in India, they had this tradition of the Rajarshi. Raja is Raja and he is Rishi. Rajarshi means both Raja, king, and Rishi, sage. Imagine having a sage as your king. Imagine having a saint as president of this country or prime minister of India. Imagine what. By the way, it has happened because in the kingdom of Mithila, Janaka, who was a rishi, he was enlightened. He ran that country. He was the king. And it was a time of extraordinary peace and prosperity. By the way, not only did the ancient Indians recognize this, in ancient Greece, Plato, in his, I think in the Republic, I think it's in the Republic, he talked about the ideal government. The ideal government would be run by a saint. He had this concept that the ruler of the government should be selected as a child, should be trained by all great scholars, and should never marry, and should never own anything. A monk. That's like a sannyasi. He should be unmarried. Why unmarried? One of the major forms of corruption is nepotism. So if you have no family members, that one is absolutely gone. And also the rule was you couldn't own anything, which means there's zero possibility of any personal benefit from that position. This is Plato's idea of the ideal ruler. So both Plato and the ancient rishis understood this problem, the problem that Nahusha says here very clearly, Riddhihi mohayati naram. Success and power corrupts a person. And we can add, to the extent that you have that success and power, to that extent you are corrupted. To the extent that you don't have success and power, to that extent you are absolutely free from that corruption. But he says, Vartamanaha sarvaha, everyone who is Vartamanaha sukhe, everyone who lives in happiness, na avaiti iti. They don't seem to understand this. Everyone, if you have some success, you want more success. If you have more success, you want even more success. But he observes, Nahusha observes, that people don't understand that the more success and prosperity they achieve, the more likely it is for them to become corrupt. He says. A very, very powerful observation here of Nahusha. Nahusha gains at highest status, at absolute power. What is the other observation? The higher you climb, the further you fall. So he had climbed to the highest heights, and he fell to the lowest of low. He fell to the status of a snake. In fact, he describes that exactly in the next verse. Soham haishwarya mohena, soham haishwarya mo, madavishto Yuddhishthira, madavishto Yuddhishthira, patitha pratisambuddhas, patitha pratisam. Tvam tu sambodhayam yaham, tvam tu sambodhayam yaham. Sahaham aishwarya mohena maravishtaha Yuddhishthira. O Yuddhishthira, saha aham, thus I was what? Mada avishtaha. I was filled with pride, having achieved that status of being the temporary Indra. Mada avishtaha. I was full of pride, and Aishwarya mohena, due to the moha, due to the delusion of Aishwarya, power and status. Due to this power and status, I became filled with pride, and then what? Patitaha, I fell. Soham patitaha, thus I fell. He fell as a result of what? He admits he was deluded by that power, and he was full of pride, and someone who's full of pride makes mistakes. And that's what happened. So patitaha. But now he says pratisambuddhaha. Now I have pratisambuddhaha. I have come back to my senses. So it's pretty hard to be full of pride when you're a snake. So this is from the highest high, Indra, status of Indra. Now he is a snake crawling around on the ground. So this is patitaha. So he has fallen from the heights to the lowest low. But now pratisambuddhaha. He has regained his understanding. The pride is gone. The delusion of power is gone. And tvam cha sambodhayami aham. And now I can tell you, tvam sambodhayami. Now I can tell you that pratisambuddhaha, I have regained a clarity of thinking, having lived as a snake. Interesting that for Nahusha to come out of that pride and arrogance born of power, it was necessary for him to fall. So that his fall had a very good consequence. Otherwise, he could have continued with that pride and arrogance without end. But because of his fall, He came to his senses. That expression, pratisambuddha, has that sense. He regained his senses. He came back to his senses. And then the story now concludes. Kritam karyam maharaja, kritam karyam maha, tvaya mama parantapa, tvaya mama kshina shapa sukratchro me, kshina shapa sukratchro, tvaya sambhashya sadhuna, tvaya sambhashya. Maharaja, O great king. Here, Ajagara, the snake, addresses Yuddhishthira. Maharaja, O great king. Parantapa, O mighty one. Mama karyam, we have to connect the words. Mama karyam, my desired work, what I needed to get done, mama karyam, kritam is done. What I needed to accomplish has been accomplished. Tvaya, by you. What I needed to accomplish has been accomplished by you. What did the snake need to accomplish? Remember, he was cursed, and the way to get out of the curse of being a snake, the way to get out was for him to have questions answered by a wise person. Which Yuddhishthira was indeed the wise person who answered his questions. So, Tvaya, thanks to you, Yuddhishthira, kritam karyam mama. Whatever I needed to accomplish is done. In this way, kshinaha shapaha me. Me shapaha, my curse. The curse that was placed on me, which was sukritchraha, this very severe curse. This extremely severe, harsh curse that was placed on me is kshinaha. It has been removed. It has been removed. Tvaya, by you, Yuddhishthira. Sambhashya, having conversed with you, because I have conversed with you, you who are sadhuna, a good, holy, wise person. Tvaya sadhuna sambhashya, having conversed with you, a saintly, wise person, kshinaha shapaha me. The severe curse I was under has been removed. That was the condition of removing the curse, was to have a discussion with someone like Yuddhishthira. And so he explains further, Brahma cha brahmanatvam cha, Brahma cha brahmanat, Yena tvahamachu chudam, Yena tvahamachu, Swasti testu maharaja, Swasti testu maha, Gamishyami divam punaha, So he says, Brahma cha brahmanam cha. Remember his first question. The Ajagara's, the snake's first question is, who is a Brahmana? Remember that in our prior class. Who is a Brahmana? And what is Brahman? So that was his first question. Who is a Brahmana? And what is Brahman? Brahma cha brahmana twadam cha. My question about what is Brahman and who is a Brahmana. Aham Achuchudam. I literally prompted. I prompted you. I questioned you. I questioned you about this. Yena. For which reason? For what reason? The reason in the prior verse. Because asking you these questions would free me from my curse. Therefore, I asked you these questions. Who is a Brahmana? And what is Brahman? He says, I asked you these questions. So he is elated because Yuddhishthira has freed him from Agastya's curse. So he says, Swasti te astu Maharaja. Maharaja, O king, Swasti te astu. Many blessings unto you. Swasti, auspiciousness. Swasti te, unto you, astu. May there be many blessings to you, O king. Gamishyami divam punaha. Punaha, now. Gamishyami, I will leave. And where will I go? Divam, I will go back to heaven. Where did he fall from? He fell from heaven. He is now freed from the curse. Where will he return? Back to Divam, heaven. So now the dialogue between Yuddhishthira and Ajagara, the snake, has concluded. Now the narrator concludes the chapter. Vaishampayana vacha Vaishampayana Hityuktva jagaram deham Hityuktva jagaram Tyaktva sanahusho nripaha Tyaktva sanahusho Divyam vapu samhasthaya Divyam vapu Gatis tridivam evaha Gatis tridivam Iti, thus, uktva, having spoken thus. Sorry, I'm analyzing the grammar here. I shouldn't do that in a class. So Ajagara, the snake, having spoken thus, what happened? Deham tyaktva. He cast off his snake body. So that's the connection. Ajagaram deham. The body of an Ajagara, the body of a cobra, tyaktva, he cast off. He cast off his cobra body, and saha nahushaha nripaha. And saha, he became that nripaha, that king, who was Nahusha, the king formerly known as Nahusha. He once again became that king Nahusha. But remember, he got appointed to this position of Indra. So not only did he regain his self as Nahusha, but Divyam Vapuhu Samastaya, he regained a Vapu, a body, which was Divyam, celestial. He did not regain a human body. He regained a heavenly body, a divine body, because he's the temporary Indra. So, as the temporary Indra, he becomes Nahusha again. He gains this heavenly body, and Gataha, he goes. Where does he go? Trividham. Trividham, one of the many names for heaven. He returns to heaven. Evaha, as it was, as the story goes, he returned to heaven. Thus concludes our story. This is the style of the entire Mahabharata. This is so characteristic of, in the midst of allow me for an editorial comment, in the midst of a ridiculous story, and it is. I mean, it's a fantastic story. I mean, what a fantastic story. First of all, look at the story. Indra disappears. The gods, pardon my American English, the gods freak out. They make this Nahusha into Indra. This Nahusha gets corrupted by his position as Indra. He gets cursed by Agastya. He becomes a giant cobra. He captures Bhima. Yuddhishthira comes to rescue Bhima. Yuddhishthira ends up freeing Nahusha from his curse. It's a ridiculous story. But it's fun. That's exactly what stories are meant for. This is how the Mahabharata teaches us. By taking profound spiritual teachings and putting them into the context of a delightful story. This is the old trick of putting the medicine in the honey. That's all it is. And the entire Mahabharata is structured like that. Story after story after story, lots of honey, with lots of profound spiritual teachings embedded in those stories. And if you take the biggest picture of the entire 84,000 verses of the Mahabharata, the spiritual teachings that are right in the middle The most profound spiritual teachings that are right in the middle of that 84,000 is the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita. That's the big perspective. In the midst of not just one story, in the midst of hundreds and hundreds of stories, comes the particular story where Arjuna asks Sri Krishna to drive the chariot out onto the battlefield, and then they have a dialogue. So that is another story. And in the context of that story, more profound spiritual teachings. This is the style of the Mahabharata. And when we meet next week, we get to the next story, which is a dialogue between the Rishi Markandeya and Yuddhishthira. Be the same context, be a story with profound spiritual teachings embedded. The slides for this will be available later in the week on our website. We'll continue with that next week. Some important announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our program for teens at 11 o'clock. Also at 11 o'clock is our Gita at Work study group. You're all invited. Tomorrow we have a special meditation program. Let me bring this to your attention. Vasanti conducts this mindful awareness meditation, and once a year she conducts a 1/2-day retreat or workshop. That will be conducted tomorrow from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. There'll be a number of sessions, all based on mindful awareness meditation. So a half-day retreat, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. You're all welcome to attend. If you'd like to attend, please sign up on the sheet over on the counter, and also check your email. There'll be some instructions posted to you. After the retreat, I'll have satsang, question and answer time out at 6:15. Also, I want to remind you that our 16th anniversary celebration is coming on June 4th, and along with that celebration, we're bringing out another souvenir. The time to solicit ads and notices for the souvenirs is running out, so we remind you and invite you. Please, if you have a business or know of someone with a business, please place an advertisement in the souvenir, or please place a message in the souvenir. There's sample souvenirs are on the counter, also some information sheets on that. If you need further information, you can speak to Mohan, who's sitting here in front. Library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.